Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher! And well, we've got into something to discuss here, haven't we, with 5-man content? Blizz has been quite open recently about dropping the ball on 5-man content in Mists of Pandaria. You didn't just drop the ball, Blizzard. You covered that thing in turkey grease and you slid it down a ramp so far, the ball never even saw the arena. We didn't even get to hold it. God damn, did you fuck it up. You put all your cards in the scenario basket, didn't you? You put everything into the scenario basket. They're gonna love these. Oh, yeah. Well, I do personally think scenarios were a bit of a fuck up. They're a great one-time thing. I recently did some more to refresh myself. I goofed around in some heroic scenarios, did some random scenarios, and what I found that even in the heroics, people are AFKing them, which is just baffling as fuck. At least in 2 out of the 10 I did, somebody went AFK after searching for a group for heroic scenarios. Next level laziness going on there. But ultimately, they were pretty boring. They were great storytelling devices, though. Dagger in the Dark, going to see the story of Vol'jin, the story of Jaina taking names. All that was brilliant. Really good stuff. One-offs, though. Now, going back and doing it again, kind of lackluster when you realise you just got to kill Captain whatever over here and then go and fight a tank that barely even wants to come near you. Not that great. But still had great rewards. Blizzard really propped up the level of rewards that you get from there. Fastest way to get your Valor points. Fastest way to do a lot of things. Nice, quick, easy stuff that you can bash out very, very quickly. And therefore, they were quite popular. Obviously, if you're going to give good rewards for relatively fast content, people are going to do them. So what about the 5-mans? We had a big discussion about 3 months ago about the hope and the prey of what actually people wanted from the 5-mans. We looked at the 5-mans across the game, from Vanilla, we looked at TBC, we looked at Wrath, we looked at Kata, and then we looked at Mr. Pandaria. And we said, you know, some people might believe in their heart of hearts we want to go back to TBC heroics, which were initially designed for raiders. I desperately don't think that's a good idea. In my heart, in my truest sense of the word, I do not believe it would be a good idea to return to TBC heroics. They were so inaccessible by the majority of the player base that by the time those guys got around to doing them, they were decked out in stuff that was well above and beyond what they were going to get for actually doing those dungeons. We had problems with super hard dungeons, which player base decided they were super hard during Wrath of the Lich King, particularly the Oculus. Yeah, we had the Nightmare of the Oculus, which was so off-put by the player base and had such a low success rate that they had to give massive amounts of rewards to try and push people to actually finish that dungeon. Instead of people queuing for like 45, 50 minutes, getting in there, seeing they got the Oculus, and then instantly leaving, which is terrible, terrible gameplay, right? That's a terrible way of spending your time in World of Warcraft. Many people don't use their time efficiently in the game, so if they're queuing for an LFD, an LFR, or whatever it might be, they will stay in a city. Blizzard's aware of that. They'll stay in a city and they'll wait for it, and they might wait that 45, 50 minutes. They'll get into a dungeon, see it's one that is notorious across the player base as being a dungeon that you do not want to be a part of, and then leave straight away. Other players, including myself, can actually get a group through the Oculus in about 10 minutes and actually get a load of extra rewards for that. And when they buffed the rewards from the Oculus, I was happy. I was like, cool, I can get people through this dungeon real easy, especially if I'm tanking, which is the majority of the stuff I did in Wrath. I can tank and get you guys through this thing, no fucking problems whatsoever. I can essentially solo the last boss. Don't even worry about it. I'll get you through it. Just follow me. But of course, in the general pugs, if you haven't got somebody who can sort of carry you through a dungeon that way, especially one with a little bit of intricacy because it has vehicle combat. Oh, the memories. The memories of seeing top world players get to Malagos and have to press 3 buttons and fail. Then, yeah, you know, the problems are... It was understandable that people struggled with that. It was very understandable. So what's the news we're talking about? Well, they haven't been very open about it, but what they have done is slip little tweets here and there, little messages here and there, that, yeah, Mr. Pandaria didn't quite work, but they also feel that Cataclysm Heroics, which is why I'm showing you this older footage, I apologize, but it was when this footage was relevant, so it kind of makes sense, is that Cataclysm Heroics were too hard. They were too hard. They had very low success rates, and that's what Blizzard wants from the stuff that is being put together with randoms. They want a reasonably high success rate. If you're going to give a system where you're going to be paired up with whoever, from whoever, it might be Tommy Tenfingers who can fucking bash out a heroic on his own, or it might be a little Jimmy who really struggles with even the most basic concepts of the game, then, you know, low success rates really put people off the system. What they don't want is a mass occurrence of things like the Oculus, where people just aren't using the LFD system because the content's just too difficult. Now, Cataclysm Heroics being too hard. Let's discuss that for a moment. It's hard for me to put myself in that position because they weren't for me at all in any way. I would actually consider them mostly pretty fucking trivial, gotta be honest. So we'll look at a couple of examples of which were the hardest considered by the player base heroics in Cataclysm. One would be definitely the Stone Core. The Stone Core heroic. It was great for me as somebody who was doing guides for people because I could hope to get into the Stone Core, and not only could I teach somebody how to play their class and how to adapt to situations, but I could also give them very clear and concise tips of how to handle these 5-mans. What we had in Cataclysm Heroics in general were large trash packs. You think about things like the Halls of Origination, the Halls of Lightning, all that kind of stuff. We had very large trash packs. Now, Blizzard was very clever in putting one particularly dangerous mob inside of a large trash pack that if you dealt with that one, you were going to be fine. You were absolutely going to be fine. You were no risk of dying, no risk of wiping. That wasn't going to occur. The problem is a lot of people don't want to learn particular trash packs. They don't give a shit. If people aren't willing to learn bosses, learning the intricacies of a trash pop isn't something people want to do. I don't get that. You know what I mean? I don't get that, and it's not something I ever endorse for you guys. You should know the ins and outs of every mob you're fighting and what they do, instead of being that guy who's just utterly confused as to why this thing occurred. You could be the guy who goes, no, this actually occurred because we let X mob run wild, and this mob has all these powers. He buffs himself. He can do all these things that are going to cause us problems, and you know what we need to do to deal with it? Just interrupt him. In the Stone Core, it was the Earth Shaper, I believe was his name. The very first trash pack in there had a 5 trash pack mob, all with some very difficult abilities. We had bleeds going on, whirlwinds that caused stacking bleeds, so if you stood next to them, you were going to die because they were just stacking bleeds on you. But people would stand in a whirlwind with no questions asked. And in there was a very innocent looking mob, this Earth Shaper. Didn't do much of anything compared to the dangers of the other mobs. But then suddenly he started to cast a very long spell, about 3 or 4 seconds, and then he turned into a giant earth elemental and wrecked your fucking shit. So what I would do is just say, guys, you be the guy who interrupts this guy, yeah? You be the guy who deals with this, and it doesn't matter if your group knows you're doing it, because you're a baller, and you're making sure this group is successful regardless of if they know or not. It doesn't matter if they know, because you're dealing with the situation and you've now become a better player, assessing the situation and dealing with problems, so the group doesn't even know they exist. Were the Cataclysm Heroics too hard? It's hard to say. I did the original Cataclysm Heroics well below the gear level required to use the queuing system. And in doing so, I also did the achievements for those. We did the Glory Meta. In the first week, I believe, of Cataclysm, I did the Glory Meta, and only by towards the end of doing that Meta did we actually have a group that was capable of using the queuing system. You can check the achievements. I believe it was on my Druid. You can check the dates I did those. So for me, no, they weren't difficult at all, but I was with an organized group, and this is something we always have to bear in mind. If you're with an organized group of raiders, gear becomes so much less relevant. So much less relevant because we can deal with mechanics better. Was Cataclysm Heroics more difficult for the general player base? I kind of have to say yes, and I don't want to. Part of me, and probably most of you, will be saying, look, if you can't deal with things like jumping, those giants that were in the Stone Core, that all you had to do to avoid wiping there was jump. If you can't handle jumping, if you can't handle interrupting, then you shouldn't be going through this dungeon in the first place. And there's a big part of me that says, you know what, I fucking agree with you. If you are incapable of doing something like jump, or incapable of doing something like interrupt, or incapable of noticing this, like, oh shit, you know when we wiped last time? That guy turned into a giant earth elemental. Maybe we should kill him first, because that guy fucking wrecked us. But what mostly happens is people go, God, why did we wipe? Healer suck. Tank plicks. What the feck, bros? And don't even notice this guy suddenly appeared as a giant earth elemental storming your fucking gates. I do kind of see the point where people are coming from with that. Is, you know, you shouldn't be doing that. But 5-man content, especially in its sort of initial form, remember when this content is relevant, always worthwhile to take that into account. No good saying, yeah, I rocked the Stone Core in my LFR Dragon Soul gear. This content is the stuff that we do at the very beginning of the expansion. People are still leveling. Members of your guild are still getting up to a level where you can get organized, have enough members that are capped with some blues to start doing the early raids. This is what that content is designed for. You're supposed to be doing it in a mix of greens and early blues, quest rewards, that kind of stuff. Getting in there and getting some decent heroic level blue items. In general, that's what they're for. And they also have to be able to be successful. They have to be able to be done. Otherwise, again, it's a failure of the system. If people cannot complete the content, that system is a failure. The content is a failure if people can't do it. So I can see Blizzard's point of view is, you know what? We are moving these things up. They're going to be more difficult than Mists of Pandaria heroics, where essentially there was no danger of failing, which is incredibly boring. That's why Mists of Pandaria 5-mans were a failure, is there was very little chance of failure. Extremely small. You had to screw up enormously in order to fuck up a Mists of Pandaria heroic. Any wipes that I see in a Mists of Pandaria 5-man is because somebody pulled the universe and basically put them in a situation where danger was a possibility, but they had to go out of their way to create that possibility, which is nuts. Nobody should be having to do that. So most of Mists of Pandaria 5-mans just felt like a time sink and hoping for drops, which is boring. It's unsuccessful in the same regard. We're going to have easy ones. What kind of level are we going to be looking at? Got to be Wrath of the Lich King, right? We've got to be looking at a level of difficulty for 5-man heroics, which is probably going to be around Wrath of the Lich King content when we launch. For those people who want Mega Challenge modes are going to be there. We've seen the recent addition. There's going to be weapons and stuff to try and encourage people to be trying challenge modes. That's fine. If you really want some desperate challenge, or you just need to have something that stimulates your mind, which I think is the case for most people, I need to have something that makes me excited to be in there, then at least challenge modes are going to exist. Hopefully the gear is going to be reasonably relevant. I was not a big fan of challenge modes because, one, while it did keep me relatively interested, transmog gear has no interest to me, therefore the rewards of doing it were pointless. Were pointless completely, and then ultimately you're looking at gold to carry buyers, and I'm not that interested in that stuff. I have done it in the past, but it's not something I'm overly excited about. We're going to have challenge mode still. The challenge will remain if you want it. But I think some of you will have to take back and take a step, and it's something I kind of agree with, is, you know what? One day I want to log in and do a 5-man, and I don't want to wipe in there. I don't want it to be so difficult that it's a nightmare chore. It's okay if you're always doing 5-man with guildmates, but let's be fair, that kind of runs out a little bit because the rewards can't be that good from a 5-man content that is early in the game, because it's likely to be blues. Maybe it'll drop an epic or whatever at the end, but it's not likely to be something you're excited about a month after the games come out. You're unlikely to be farming that shit a month later for a drop. And it might just be something you want to get some points from. It might be something you just want to help a friend out with. And it might be something you just want to drop in for rep, if we see a rep return to 5-mans or whatever it might be. And then you kind of do want a reasonably high success rate, but still not so weak that you're not in any danger of failing whatsoever, and therefore it's just a case of I need to allot 20 minutes to get this dungeon done, and I can drool on my keyboard to get it done. Hopefully there'll be... Wrath of the Lich King 5-mans could be carried by 4. Will it put a stop to the AFKers? I think that's another question a lot of people are going to be asking. Is this going to stop people AFKing dungeons? It's LFD. No. It doesn't even matter how hard it is. I don't think that will ever stop. People are given the opportunity to get in a dungeon and hopefully get by without doing anything. People are going to try and take that option. They really are, no matter what's going on. I mean, like I say, to see people join a heroic scenario, having to make groups and then get in there and go AFK, people are always going to do that. I don't think there's any real solution to human nature that comes from challenging content at all. It's just going to be a case of those people get kicked more often and replaced with somebody who's going to do something. Wrath of the Lich King level, can I tolerate that? Yeah, I think so. As long as there's further, more difficult content coming on down the line that's more 5-man related. The ICC 5-mans were great. I had a great time in all of them, pretty much. Pit of Sauron I thought was particularly cool. People disagree with me there because they had difficulty with the ramp in particular in the Pit of Sauron. But I personally liked it. The bosses were interesting. There was mechanics that were worth doing. Weren't super difficult. You could get a high success rate. It was all right. We had the ZG, Zolaman. They were kind of out of whack. Considerably more difficult in interestingly enough, than the actual ICC 5-mans. Still dropped reasonable rewards, but it was odd to see that the difficulty level of the ZG Trolley 5-mans was a little bit more difficult. But what we did have was 3 releases of 5-man content, which increased and were more relevant to the content. We got a wonderful story in the Halls of Reflection, which added on to the fact that ICC was there. Really cool stuff. A Wrath of the Lich King model, I'm actually okay with. I think that's fine. Wrath of the Lich King 5-man content was pretty good. I did it up until the end of the expansion. It was a great place to go and do guides from my personal point of view because, yeah, there was a chance of dying. There was mechanics going on where I could show you how to use more tools in your toolbox than were just do damage, which is great. We'd love to see that. Love to see. I always like to make players better, and including that, players getting better on their own by actually using other abilities in there, which we don't need to use in current 5-man content. It's just a case of whack the fucking dummy and it will die, and we collect stuff which we don't need and move on and go forward. So interested to see what you guys feel about this. I know some of you will be like, no, I want desperately hard content. That's only okay if you're like a raider who's only going to be doing the 5-mans for probably the first month. I can kind of see your point there. But overall, the longevity of the game, we can't make it too difficult if it's going to be accessible by everybody in the world through a random grouping system. I can totally see where they're coming from with that. All right, guys, have a great day. I'll see you later. Bye.